We talk about global capability centers and the evolution of these centers. So just a bit of introduction. I'm a partner in Deloitte's GCC advisory practice, essentially advising clients on their new GCC landings into the country. For whatever reason, fortunately or unfortunately, I've been doing this all my professional life. So even before GCCs were called GCCs. Seen the evolution very closely. But very interestingly, I think there's been a lot of attention just post-COVID, right? And just to put some numbers in perspective, over 1,800 GCCs are there in the country as we speak. The interesting facet of it is it took 30 years for the first 1,000 centers to be set up, right? The next 1,000 came in the last 10 years. So that kind of sums up the velocity of adoption of this model globally, right? So today in India, we host about 25% of the global Fortune 500 companies have their global capability centers in India. And we look at the Forbes or the Globe's 2000 list, the number goes to about 30-35% of these companies, right? But most interestingly, the last set of years, we have specifically been seeing those, what we call as the mid-market or the medium-sized organizations, the sub $2 billion and $1 billion top-line companies, which are also, very actively setting up GCCs. And there's a lot of push from the central as well as all the state governments to kind of drive these investments in. At Deloitte, we had put out a research, to quantify the economic impact of the GCCs in the country itself. So interestingly, for every dollar that is being spent in a GCC, there is $3 net GVA impact, right? And from an employment perspective, for every employment generated in GCC, there is an additional 4 jobs that get created, right? So, and with the nature of work that is going on, and like the title says, like 4.0, I personally stopped keeping track of the version upgrades, but unequivocally, what is for sure is the version upgrades that is happening, right? Sizable, significant upgrades in the operating model that we are all looking at. So from that perspective, the conversation today is where does this go from here? What next? And especially in the advent of AI, it becomes a very interesting conversation. And I think some of us were all catching up on that $1 million question as well. Where is AI going to kind of fit within this model? How is it going to redefine and reshape the model is where we will take the conversation from here. And of course, there is heavy gravitas in the panel here, folks who have been there, done that for many, many years. I'll let them introduce as we go through, to start with. Chetan, maybe I'll start with you. Maybe the evolution part of it itself, right? You have also closely seen this growth in Siemens over time. Starting off as more of the, cost arbitrage being the value delivered. And then, the productivity improvements, continuous improvements, and so on. Now global delivery happening at scale. 50 plus countries are being supported from India in this model. What next in terms of the evolution itself? What would this 4.0 essentially look like in your view?
Thank you. In fact, if you had paid attention, you don't see my picture there because I'm filling in for Pankaj. My name is Chetan. I am a vice president in Siemens Technology dealing with digitalization. So, yeah, and as Keerthi was mentioning, have been in this industry for quite some time, have seen multiple things happen, change over the last 2 decades. What next? So, it's a good point that you're mentioning, do not keep those version numbers intact. But if some of you have read Tom Friedman's The World is Flat, I think he wrote 3.0. Probably it's time for 4.0. So what is changing? The landscape. In the past, the West or the headquarters as or many GCCs refer them to, came with a lot of domain expertise and tech head start. There were people who were working in this particular field, doing these things for years together. If I say power electronics, there would always be that one Mr. Power Electronics or Miss Power Electronics who's been doing it for 25 years. But then what is happening today, not just with AI, but true democratization of knowledge. So AI is as new to a person in the headquarters as it is to us. The availability of information is truly democratized. So what is this leading to? This is leading to end-to-end ownership. So gone are the days where everything will be done and I'll tell you, you have to hire 10 people, 15 people, set this up and they will do Java programming. No. Now it is about changing, shifting the gears and saying this is the end-to-end ownership era. Now what I see happening in the future, of course, through my limited vantage point, is that this will continue to accelerate. A lot of end-to-end ownership in terms of products, and for processes, the transformation processes will be led by India, will be driven by the GCCs. Now, this is something that we clearly see. The second trend that we are seeing, or at least we have started seeing, is how and what kind of impact AI is bringing. The positive impact, I mean. So, conventionally, if you had asked any GCC, it would have been how many people? 1,500 people, 10,000 people, 4,000 people. Now, in the boardroom, it is no longer about how many people. In the boardroom, it is about, of course, the impact. Like what kind of impact is being generated. And one very interesting conversation has started creeping in. What is your token budget? So, very recent phenomena, but then there are people in our own organization who can burn up to €100 worth of tokens in 2 days. That's not small. So, now it is moving from scaling people, having X number of headcount, to what kind of impact and what is needed, what is the fuel. Because GCCs always said, if I hire 10 people and pray, hope they don't leave, then it will start paying back, right? Because all the expense that you had to do was the employee benefit and salaries. But today, there is this new component that is coming in, which is the token budget, which is kind of having a leading to very interesting conversations in the boardroom. So from scale to impact, but there are also underlying aspects. Where is the compute coming from? All of these things. So that is still changing, and I think we will all collectively know where it goes. Okay? Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
Thank you for that, Chetan. I think I'll just pick a cue from what you were talking about, especially around building domain expertise over time, the end-to-end ownership. One of the domains where we are seeing a lot of traction is in the engineering research and development as an area. Of course, going beyond IT, going beyond business corporate support function, and so on. And interestingly, with a CAGR of about 13%, that's the fastest growing sector. Right, within the larger IT and BPM services sector. In fact, it surpassed BPM's contribution also last year. And 50-60% of the engineering R&D spend that happens in the GCCs are largely around digital engineering, right? So Kiran, maybe from a HCL standpoint, how will you truly differentiate an engineering center versus the other prominent models, like the offshore development centers, the virtual centers, and so on available? What qualifies as a true engineering R&D center in your view?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kiran Cherukuri. I represent HCL Technologies. I take care of the global GCC business. As we speak, close to around 250 clients which we'll support in this line of business. I think as Keerthi mentioned that 40% of the current clientele which we service, they claim to be global engineering centers or centers of excellence. That's the title of the center. But however, what we see is predominantly even today, a good amount of work which they do is execution centric and more in terms of uh, trying to fulfill the requirements which have come in from their headquarters, right? Uh, Having said that, like it's not that like there's no cutting edge work which is not happening from these some of these engineering and excellence centers, but I think the foundationally the difference is an offshore delivery center. There is a service request that comes, or there is a service that is asked, and the center delivers to meet an SLA, or probably deliver a code, or probably optimize a cost structure, standardize a cost structure. This is what foundationally a service delivery organization does. Whereas an engineering excellence center should be able to specify the problem statement, define the problem, shape the architecture to solve this, and improve that model, take the product ownership, be accountable for the outcomes of the product or a platform that delivers, right? So out of these 40% of the centers that are claiming to be engineering and R&D centers, maybe 30 to 40% of them have that mandate of end-to-end ownership for a solving a problem or developing a product. And majority of them will do a subtask, probably adding a few features to a larger product line, which is the headquarters, the enterprise owns. So there are four key parameters. How much IP is released from the GCCs, right? And how many products that are rolled out or services that are rolled out which are adding directly to the top line or a bottom line of the enterprise. And end-to-end ownership. When we're talking about a foundational research or a frontier research, how much budgets are allocated and how much autonomy is there at the GCC level. So some of these are the litmus tests for a particular center is categorized as a true engineering and an excellence center. Of course, take an example of Qualcomm. The India GCC owns today around 12,000 plus patents, which is a very large number of patents which they have filed, right? And specific example from HCL. So we work with a global appliances company, okay, which sells microwave ovens for $280 in Walmart in the US. Came with a problem statement. We are looking at the next version of our microwave oven to be 10% cheaper than its immediate competition. But however, in terms of the feature set, then we want it to give large number of features and then cover some of those which are not there at this point of time. The entire starting the day one R&D onwards, how to go about on this to deliver the end of the product, which is happening from their engineering center in India, right? So some of those examples are definitely there. An end-to-end research, not a concept to manufacturing, is also owned by the India Engineering Center. They may not call them as a GCC, as Keerthi said that like it is an evolved word, right? GCCs, but I think they call them as India Engineering Center. So that's the foundational difference from a cost arbitrage to SLAs to cost optimization to new IP, new products, and then direct impact to the top line and then bottom line. So that's the foundational difference between these two.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kiran. Maybe I'll just shift gears and get to Santhosh with an interesting topic. AI is going mainstream, is becoming a living medium. So, Santhosh, from your perspective, and IBM has been in the front and center of this for many, many years, even before we have been talking AI. With the advent and the onset of AI, how do you see GCCs to be rethinking about their larger strategy towards, growth, towards driving innovation for the enterprise and the leverage that they have with India as a location.
Awesome. Thank you, Keerthi. Very good morning. So I think Keerthi mentioned about IBM's history with AI. Maybe I should step back and talk about it. Before that, let me introduce myself. I'm going to soon start my 30th year in IBM. Different roles all through, but responsible for the GCC offering and growth in IBM. But if I really look at it, our IBM journey on AI dates way back almost when the word AI was being coined. So almost 7 decades is when we've been associated with AI, right from when the researchers were thinking about, really augmenting intelligence is how it all started off. So if I really look at it, I think it evolved, right? I think all of us are familiar with what happened with Gary Kasparov and the whole chess, deep blue related aspect. That was one of the era where we were trying a few permutation combinations using AI. Then we went into the whole Jeopardy, the Q&A, which became very effective. That's where we sort of started evolving. And then we've gone into an entire journey of where we are today. I think our strategy of trying to drive hybrid cloud and AI in the terms of responsible AI is where, if we are really looking at it, has been the broad strategy. And the way we've, in line with what Keerthi mentioned, right, while what we are trying to bring very clearly is domain experience in a platform-centric approach. And the way we've gone about it is, it's not about trying to go and give license A or license B to the developers or testers. Can we really bring it in a platform-centric approach? And that's exactly where we've actually launched a platform called IBM Enterprise Advantage. The objective very clearly is to really look at it, can I augment the intelligence which is there in a requirements gathering business analyst? Can I really augment the intelligence which is there in a developer and a tester and so on? So the entire software development lifecycle is something where we augment using this platform. That's from a technical aspect. The other way we've gone about while we have looked at the entire SDLC is, can we also look at it from a business process perspective? So the way we've gone about is, can I look at HR, finance, procurement related aspects and revamp it first for our own self? And that's what we call as the client zero case study. And you would have seen in the market in the last 5 years, there is a reason why IBM stocks has been doing good, where we feel proud about it. Because one, very clear strategy, hybrid cloud and responsible AI. Second, we are taking case studies of how we have revamped our HR aspects, our procurement aspect, our own finance aspect, or our own legal, effectively using the AI solutions in a platform-centric approach. And that's what we are taking across to our GCCs. So going into the GCC world, if we really look at it, there are different aspects of GCCs, right? Some of them are very mature GCCs, as our colleagues here mentioned about it, who are ready to take the plunge and take more ownership and change the game. The aspect where we are talking about changing the game, very clearly was called out about number of patents, product-centric approach, and the solution. So we are working with some of the key GCCs who have that end-to-end ownership of driving outcomes, effectively leveraging AI is one. We're also working with some of the GCCs to really see how we can augment their current capacity to an extent where they can be much more productive. Because what we've proven to the world by giving back in the recent results it came out, we've given back about $4.5 billion in productivity savings by effectively using AI for our own internal solution. So proof is there in the pudding. We are taking these solutions and taking through some of the mature GCCs who are ready to shift the center of gravity to have product owners, who have outcome-based owners out here, so that we can really take them to the next level as AI is becoming center to whatever is being delivered out of our GCCs.
Thank you, Santhosh. So essentially, you're taking the pills before you prescribe. I think it was an interesting point that you mentioned on productivity improvement. And there was a recent research report that I came across. So one that says that there is no shortage for pilots and POCs in AI, right? Getting past the POC bump is the larger question. And Chetan, maybe you have been toying around this as well for long in Siemens. And this report interestingly had two comparisons, right? First, it said the amount of investments going into POCs versus what has actually been scaled, right? And if you look at the POC ones, and they had it in three categories: productivity oriented, preference oriented. Preference is more your UI, UX, all the moment of truth in a digital world, and then performance. Performance is more your revenue, top line, expansion growth, and so on. So the productivity obviously in the POC was the highest, I think about 60%, and then say a 20-20 split across the other two categories. The actual scaling was interestingly the reverse. Performance was the largest bucket, then came preference, and then came productivity. So Chetan, your experience of, how can we kind of get past the POC bump? And this categorization that I gave you from a Siemens standpoint, does it resonate? Your views around it?
That's an interesting one. In fact, maybe we are referring to the same report. I think I remember this was from McKinsey, which spoke about the AI paradox. So around 80% of the companies are making investments in AI. Okay. And roughly around 80% of the CEOs say, of these companies, they say, we have not seen substantial gain, return on investment, impact on P&L. Because the investments, as Keerthi was mentioning, is going into a lot of POCs. So this is like death by 1,000 POCs. Like POCs are always successful. And they are disproportionately attractive. Like you always on a routine basis see that this POC is saving 60% of the effort. Like this will change the way we are doing business, but almost always they do not pass that gate where we are ready to push it into production and then thereby realize the gains. Okay. So what has worked well for us, and of course we are no exception, we are in the same boat. We have learned this through a lot of pain. We have a lot of battle scars to show how we learned this. But a few things that have worked for us, not necessarily it will work for every other organization, but things that have worked for us is about governance. Because POC is like your proving ground. Like you don't have to drive like proving ground as in where the automotives are tested, right? So you don't have to do all the rules. You can just keep driving, push the limits. But when it comes to production, there are a lot more regulations, rules, things at stake. So first thing is governance. Governance is, like though it might sound a bit more process and then red tape to a certain extent, some of you might feel, yeah, what is this? Especially if you are from a startup community, you feel, yeah, we understand what governance is. But trust me, governance right from the beginning, how you implement, how you take it to the production grade governance is extremely important. See, for us, there are multiple cases where the POCs have failed, not because technology is bad. It is only because your governance is weak. It clearly says this is not applicable to a certain geography. Things like that. So that is the first thing. The second thing that we have also understood where POCs work is, like when you are running a POC, latency is not a big deal for you. Like you can always convince the person sitting next to you, your boss, whoever is the stakeholder, yeah, it's working. Like, and then you see a spinning wheel there and everybody is willing to wait. They say it's fine because it's a POC. Now deploy that to a production and then ask people to wait for 25 seconds. Not that they will be doing something great, winning the next Nobel Prize in those 25 seconds. But each one of you, 25 seconds feels like eternity. So what works amazingly well in POC, maybe because the data set was small, the use case itself was not such a big one, but as soon as it migrates to production, this will surely kill the product or offering. That's the second thing that we have observed. The third thing is, which is a little kind of a kind of irony, because in this field, and like all of us have been in this, everybody in the audience, we have been in this field and we are so well adapted to change. Like something that you learned is no longer recognizable. But in this field, in this area, the things have started changing at such rapid pace. There is CloudBot. I was formatting my laptop, I was about to install, and in the next 2 days, meaning I thought I'll do it in the weekend, in the next 2 days, it has entirely changed. So what you built as the state-of-the-art tech stack and offering as POC is no longer relevant. Things are changing very fast. So you have to make sure that your use cases are clearly charted out, your tech stack is flushed out very clearly. Only then it can go to the next stage. And for this, what you need is stakeholder management. So irrespective of what the technology is, the basics remain the same. It is the same stakeholder management. How do you get attention? You say this will add so much to my top line, or this will gain so much in terms of bottom line. The customer satisfaction, those first principles are not changing. These are some of the lessons that we have learned, have worked for us. Okay? Then of course, it keeps changing, as I said.
Thank you, Chetan. That was very nicely and structurally laid out. I think the key takeaway I have is stick to the basics. And on that topic, Santhosh, basics again comes to talent, right? And in this redefining moment, right? How do you see GCCs and even beyond GCCs, other organizations kind of approaching and looking at their talent strategy? What is your perspective of how we need to look at talent? And to the point that Chetan made in terms of we are change adaptable, but what does it mean? Are we ready, or what needs to be done further from a talent perspective?
Very important question. Lots of discussions around talent and scale and so on. And with GCCs, as we been talking, it used to be very clearly a headcount game, if I may call it that way. And there were power centers who used to feel very good about managing 10,000 resources or 5,000 resources. And that's the way even several of our GCCs today feel they're doing good. With the AI, I'm not even going towards Gen AI, basic automation and AI. We've seen there is a lot of question which is coming up. I think Chetan brought up a very important aspect earlier about token, the number of tokens being used and the financial burnout with usage of tokens. The reality on the ground is, while the headcount game did deliver what it had to during that point of time from a bottom line perspective, from a labor arbitrage and so on, with the advent of AI, those GCCs who are not really looking at it from ensuring that my talent is going to adapt to AI and effectively use AI to augment what I'm doing, not just drive from a productivity perspective, but also look at it from business outcomes or delivering features from a top line perspective much ahead of time. I think those are GCCs where there is clearly a vision of how to accept and adopt to AI. The GCCs which are still with the view that I'm going to go and maybe just use my headcount and add a layer of AI are the ones who will probably just survive for a few more months, the way things are really going at pace. So our suggestion or our recommendation is look at your talent in terms of two aspects. One, deep tech related skills, which will continue to be there. Those deep tech resources will have the ability to adopt to any sort of an AI, automation, Gen AI solution, because it's going to be, with the vibe coding era, you probably need not be even technical, right? So we are entering phases where the integrated development environment with vibe coding related aspects, it's happening here and now. So for someone who's deep tech, I don't think adapting to those changes will be a challenge. So you keep the tech stack and the tech talent, but the most important aspect which you really look at it is domain expertise. Chetan mentioned about Siemens really looking at it from a product perspective. So are there subject matter experts who really understand the domain end to end? Because it's very, very clear the GCCs who's going to really strive and excel are the ones who will take end-to-end product ownership here, end-to-end outcome-based ownership, no longer continue with large headcount being the ones which is going to take it forward. So look at it from the ability of where can AI add on to the deep tech from a software development lifecycle or an operations, or aspects of bring on the domain related expertise and make sure that this COE sort of talent is how you really look at it. And it's a given, right? In the terms of how do we scale continuously? Are there aspects the way we do it for our own people? Do you bring in badges to make sure that they progress through the technology aspect and domain aspect so that you can really certify people? So these are things which we recommend, but I think gone are the era of just looking at it from a headcount number base and so on. If they are not able to realize that I need to look at it as a GCC leader to be relevant, not really have resources in large numbers, how many of them are relevant resources for me for the future? If they are looking at it from that perspective, I think it's going to be very clearly differentiator. And we are seeing many of the GCCs, I would say almost 30% of the GCCs have come to terms that it's no longer about volumes, it's about relevance and the right skill combinations, and also train our talent to make sure that they can be much more responsive. The remaining 40% are trying to go towards that above 30 is how I look at it. And there are still the bottom 30 who believe having higher headcount is still the way to go, and so on and so forth. So we are seeing different levels of acceptance and maturity from the different GCCs. But I think the top 30s are way ahead of that, of trying to accept, adopt, and really transform.
Thank you, Santhosh. Time flies listening to all your perspectives. So that brings me to the last question. And Kiran, I'll start with you, and I'll continue to stick to the basics like Chetan said, and would like to briefly get Chetan, yours and Santosh's view on this topic as well. The most foundational element that I see is the leadership approach and the grit towards adoption and scaling of AI, right? So for those new GCCs to claim or eventually become, say, AI native GCCs, or for the ones who have been there for longer and to say that truly we have kind of scaled, what are those leadership bets in your view that the GCCs must be taking today in order to get to that state?
Yeah, let me start with that 4 phases of the GCCs, right? So I think wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, and then now today we are talking about wave 4. There are greenfield GCCs and then the mid-market GCCs which are entering into the country, still coming with some of the wave 1 expectations. Those are probably standardization, optimization, and then probably the cost arbitrage, right? So I think it's not that like we can completely rule out the wave 1. There are wave 1 GCCs, especially among the greenfield ones, right? There is wave 2. Definitely there is a set of GCCs, a good number, maybe 25 to 30% of them, still focused on the delivery excellence. Delivering it faster, cheaper, better with an incremental innovation. Right. The third is the one which is primarily talking about innovation and then transformation. The fourth wave is AI adoption. So I think these are the 4 buckets of the GCC stages that which we look at, right? Each one of them, expectations are slightly different from AI. The one which is in the first 2 buckets are primarily using a plethora of AI tools retrofitted, okay, to be able to actually deliver point productivity, point solutions. That's going on. Area 3, that's a third bucket where AI aiding their innovation. I think that's an area where definitely it's not just the leadership out here, but I think it is an enterprise leadership at their headquarters should be able to actually define what are the areas where the GCC has an autonomy to be able to actually experiment on those. As Chetan mentioned that it's like an automobile environment. I think the mileage is great, and then the max speed on a track. What happens is I think every automobile hits. But when it comes to the real world, and there is a challenge. So your data is not ready, your process is not ready, right? So, and then you do not have a autonomy to be able to actually scale it up and deploy things. So these are the areas where I think the GCCs are currently challenged, and there has to be a leadership grit. And then there is enough time and budget that need to be allocated for the areas where they would like to do this experiment beyond the experimentation and then rolling it out to the larger enterprise. I'll stop here and then let the
Thank you, Kiran. Maybe Santhosh and Chetan, your very quick views before we close.
Yeah, just, everything has been covered. As a leader, if you want to build an AI native organization, AI native development organization, there are a bunch of things that you have to, but the first and the foremost thing is you should be able to navigate through the unknowns. It is extremely underrated skill. Every CEO knows this. They do it through market conditions, but tech has never been this unpredictable. Meaning there were people who were doing 2-year, 5-year roadmaps. These days, 6 months roadmap is an amazing thing to have. So that is the first thing, navigate through uncertainty. Okay. Now, uncertainty is on the tech side. On the people side, it is even more interesting. There is something that we are calling role compression. Now, software engineers are a different breed. I can only see parallel with cardiologists. There are cardiologists who say, I will just operate on valve, nothing else. You have high cholesterol, I'll recommend you to my friend, but I'm not the guy. Some similar parallels in software. The guy says, I am an Angular expert. I will not do no backend. I am a DevOps guy. Now those days are numbered. The days are about role compression. You probably will have 1 role, 2 roles, 3 roles, not 15 roles. And those of you who are interested, I know there are startups here, you should look for what is called forward deployed engineer. I think every startup should hire forward deployed engineers. Look for AI, OpenAI's job openings. I think you will find that. Amazing job description. It says you have to do everything, but in a different type of English. But read that, okay? So that, and what Santhosh was mentioning, see, this industry has been built on how big is my empire. Number of people is directly proportional to your growth. That relation is changing, the incentive is changing, and as a leader, you should anticipate what is coming and look at the right talent. Yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you, Chetan.
I'll just summarize, I think, both the leaders and Keerthi also mentioning. So a couple of things, right? When I really look at it, which keeps coming to my head, there is nothing artificial about artificial intelligence. I think it's a fact. The more the leaders accept that we need to look at AI to augment intelligence at different sources. It can be technology intelligence or domain or subject matter expertise, where and how I bring in a platform-centric approach. And the most important thing of AI today is the fact, which we didn't probably touch upon, is the trust deficit. right? Which is going to be extremely important. And that's one of the reasons where we are continuously almost, bombarding with the responsible AI drive, because we don't want AI to go on in a journey where later on you start adding AI, responsible AI, more like an audit. Right from your beginning, when you're training your resources to accept and adopt to a platform-centric AI approach, engineering responsible AI aspects of preventing bias, making sure that you understand the source of the data on effectively how you're using it. So he touched upon governance very clearly. How do you actually bring in? So our solution of what we have as watsonx.data, watsonx.ai, and watsonx.governance really tries to bring this whole thing from a responsible AI perspective. So the leader needs to look at it from how do I bring in the trust aspect in the solutions which I'm trying to deliver. So I would leave with the view that accept that there is nothing more artificial of artificial intelligence. It's all about augmenting, and then really look at it from an end-to-end responsible AI aspects in wherever you're bringing in AI across the board.
Thank you, Santhosh. I think the last part of the conversation could be a panel in itself, I guess, right? Probably for the next time. But thank you, panelists, for a very engaging discussion, very insightful, and thank you, everyone, for staying up with us.